Thank you very much, Deputy Casey and Deputy Castells. Whilst we welcome some of the initiatives in the bill, I think that the Local Government Rates Bill gives us an opportunity here in the House to reflect on the rates, the ratepayers, and how that has been ordered over the last while and how it's going to be ordered over the next while. And there is no doubt that we are at a major junction in relation to retail. We are at a major junction in relation to towns and villages and how they operate in this country. And whilst we've seen some of towns that have almost ground to a halt in terms of business closing and empty spaces, empty shop fronts and empty retail units, and we hear time and again the small businesses, which in some instances the type of business they have don't have a major footfall, and they talk about the rates and the rates bill that they get. And I suppose the other argument that comes in as well, that the rates is not reflective in terms of turnover and so forth. And there's a whole raft of issues in terms of funding and how the rates have developed over the years. And of course, Deputy Casey is right in relation to the revaluation and all that process that's going to come down the tracks. And anywhere that has been revalued, the ginormous cost or increases that have been foisted, I suppose, on businesses. But I do think that there's an opportunity here for us to reflect on rates and on the funding of local government, and then how we look at the traditional market towns. I suppose, if you look at the towns of Charleville, Kanturk or Millstreet or Newmarket, or how they were servicing a major hinterland over the years, how they were developed and how that they were allowed grow and flourish, and I suppose reflect the countryside and the services that they provide for the people that they serve, and how that has died out, and how some of those retail units have been there for generations, very successful and working extremely hard. But the way online has come and the way the challenges have come to their doors, and we are at a junction, I suppose, in terms of how our market towns are going to survive into the future, and there has to be a new vision in terms of what units are in there and how we are going to encourage people in there. And we've seen a lot of the out-of-town planning. We've seen a lot of the retail units, the major retail units, moving out of town and changing I suppose, the town centres and the decay within the town centres. And we have to be very innovative about how we are going to revalue them. Back 20 years ago, the Town Renewal Scheme came in, and it was an initiative at the time to try and develop towns, and a lot of the towns that were granted the Town Renewal Scheme benefited from it, and units that had decayed and units that had fallen into disrepair, they were given a tax incentive to try and develop them. And if you balance that scheme out, I think it was almost 20 years ago this year, if I'm not mistaken, when it was brought in, 1999. And what actually happened there was that the development that took place, what it was costing in relation to the tax incentive to develop it, and what the building materials, the work that was given, it was almost cost neutral to the Exchequer. And the towns that benefit from it 20 years ago, that benefit is reflected in, I speak of Kanturk and Charleville, who benefited from it 20 years ago, and that has benefited from it. But we do need to be very innovative again as we are challenging it. And we can discuss the tax, the rate scheme. You can discuss it in isolation and say, better efficiency in terms of collection and how to all of that. But there is a bigger discussion here, and we have to make sure that we are bringing all our towns, because we cannot allow them to die out. And if you allow them to die out, and we've seen discussions are in different parts of the country where county towns have almost disappeared, and you are losing an identity, you're losing units. And then you see on the East Coast where there's massive development, but it's housing development, and it is almost dormant towns, or towns that people are commuting long distances. But we must try and ensure that we have any initiative we have under this bill or any other bill. And I think if we take the rates as we are discussing them, What are we going to do when we are looking at rates, and how are we going to incentivise people to move into the units that are now vacant in every town in this country? What is the incentive that we need to give in place there? What is it to empower the local authorities to give a rates rebate scheme? Is it to empower the local authorities to identify the crisis? Some people, would say, oh, we have to take stock of it. I think every public representative in society, whether they're, representing urban or rural Ireland, they understand the challenges that are out there in relation to retail, and we do have to go very deeply into the drawing board and go back to a town renewal scheme system that there was 20 years ago, to give a huge initiative to the rural towns that I represent, because there is a huge need for those rural towns to flourish. There's a huge need to keep them there. We've seen the fantastic education facilities that are in these county towns, and the quality of life that people can get from living in these communities is second to none, in my opinion, and I think that could be, I would challenge that anywhere. It is second to none, but we have to give a massive incentive as to make sure that we, as a state, as a government, as a Dáil, that we want these towns to continue to flourish, because if they don't, the rural countryside around it will decline. And we've seen the challenges that will be over the next while in relation to agriculture and in relation to the future of the agricultural communities. But we have to make sure that we can keep these towns alive. And I think you have to, Minister, go back. I know that you have suggested in your statements that you would be bringing amendments to the legislation, but I do think that you need to be very innovative in terms of making sure that whatever is there on rates or the collection of rates, that we have at the heart of it some initiative to keep these communities and these county towns alive. Go to Míle Maithfidh.